I first met Funda when I attended an event here on campus sponsored by the UA Women's and Gender Resource Center. It was a training focused on emotional trauma, similar to this, but it was really focused very specifically on professionals, and it was a day-long training, and she made us dance. That kind of imprinted on my brain that there was a trainer who made us get up and dance. I'm not kidding you, dance, literally. That's what she was getting us to do. So I remembered her. Impressed by her knowledge, her energy, and her enthusiasm, when we began brainstorming on the keynote speaker for this year's REACTS conference, Funda came to my mind. She's an individual affiliate of the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. Now that's a big deal. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network was created by Congress in 2000 as part of the Children's Health Act to raise the standard of care and increase access to services for children and families who experience or witness traumatic events. This unique network of frontline providers, family members, researchers, and national partners is committed to changing the course of children's lives by improving their care and moving scientific gains quickly into practice across the U.S. Funda is an affiliate. She's an external affiliate of that organization. This is a big deal. We're lucky she's here. I'm very excited that she was able to be here. Now, here's the part about the Alabama connection. I won't tell you where she got her degree, because we're on the wrong campus for that. But she previously worked as a children's counselor for the Family Sunshine Center in Montgomery, Alabama. So she's from outside of Alabama. She's from outside the U.S., as you'll hear in just a moment. She's from living outside of Alabama at the moment, but she's been in Alabama with us. There she gained extensive experience providing services to individuals of all ages with diverse cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds and varying degrees of traumatic stress and comorbidity. She understands the troubles that we face here in Alabama. With the developmental understanding of traumatic stress granted by her clinical experience, she wrote and illustrated My Big Book of Answers, a fully illustrated self-help workbook for 3 to 9-year-old survivors of violence. This workbook translates complex scientific information about traumatic stress into a language that even 3-year-olds can understand, so I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to understand her today, because she made it understandable for toddlers. The workbook also helps therapists and parents deal with difficult topics such as parental substance abuse, child maltreatment, illness, and death. She currently resides in Atlanta, where she provides training, consulting, grant writing, and psychotherapy. She's interested in application of the fine arts as a delivery modality for traumatic stress relief interventions. And she's very interested in complex trauma, child traumatic grief, and the Justice Consortium collaborative work groups. I want to draw your attention to the fact that the title of her presentation is slightly different than what shows, well, it's actually incredibly different than what shows in the program. The correct title for her presentation is Paradigm Shifts in the Treatment of Traumatic Stress, Exploring the Power of Our Nervous System to Heal. And so I want to thank Funda and ask you all to welcome her up with the enthusiasm that your coffee might have just given you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, kind words. And it's an honor for me to be here with you. It's a beautiful day outside. Did you guys notice coming in the beautiful sunshine? The weather is just right. Now you're spending this time here instead of being outside because of your big hearts and your desire to learn, to grow, to help those kids that you're working with better. You're true advocates, and I'm honored to be here with you. Give yourself a big hug right now and a good clap. Thank you so much. So I really want to talk about some new things that we have had brewing up since the late 1990s in terms of scientific research and how they might apply to our work and really improving our prevention services and decreasing the time it takes to help kids overcome trauma. Because as you know, right now, for the most part, it takes at least 12 months to help a traumatized child overcome, even a single trauma, right? It takes a long time of steady work. However, before I go on, let me tell you a little bit about my own passions. All my life, I've been wondering about this question. Before I became a counselor, I was an industrial designer and an artist, and I asked this question: a child born with endless curiosity, openness, trust, love, how does that child become this adult who's rejecting, uncaring, hurtful, hateful? How does that happen? And I grew up in a country where there is a lot of violence, really senseless violence, that destroys resources, that takes good things and turns them into really bad things, that everybody gets hurt from. Even the people who make that change happen get hurt from this. It didn't seem rational to me, and I was wondering why. So about a decade ago, I experienced a medical trauma that almost killed me. And one good thing about traumas, they can give you the power to recreate your life the way it needs to be, to really utilize everything you have and really create the life you need to have. And that medical trauma, that closeness to death and reevaluation process helped me to drop art and design and go to Auburn University and get my master's degree in counseling and become a counselor. I worked with adolescent sex offenders during my internship, and that's when I realized that there's something going on there, and it's a toxic exposure. So how many of you in this room have never heard of the Adverse Childhood Experiences Studies, ACEs? Have you never heard of it? Okay, so I'll just briefly go through this few slides. These are some numbers. These are the things that might seem dark about the world for you. The number of completed suicides just in the United States is 45,000. Intimate partner violence, IPV, 10 million people live in households in the United States alone in 1 year where people who are supposed to love and protect each other are hurting each other deliberately. It's crazy, right? And how much do we spend on these things? Look at that. Obesity, $147 billion a year. Intimate partner violence, $8.3 billion a year. Addictions, $600 billion. Disabilities, $40 billion in only insurance costs, and only for the non-institutionalized Americans. These are incredible numbers. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't need to be. There's a common cause among all of these. And this is the toxic exposure that I discovered first when I was, in my own practice I discovered. Other people had discovered before me. If you get 6 doses of this toxic exposure, your chances of attempting suicide increases 3,000%. Now, we don't smoke in public places because it increases our risk of heart attack and disease 100%. This is 3,000% we're talking about. And this is a scientific study done on 17,000 people, and then throughout 2 decades, it's been supported by other studies. Look at that, obesity, 540% with just one exposure, one dose, your risk increases. And it depends on family support as well. And it increases your vulnerability to PTSD. If you experience this toxic exposure just once, your chances of having a PTSD reaction to a large stressor that we call trauma increases 87%. And disabilities, with 3 doses, your risk of developing a disability increases 20%. But look, 7 doses, it's 100% you're going to develop some kind of a disability, right? So right now, you're probably wondering, how can I avoid this toxic exposure? And it's contagious. It changes our genes. It changes our genes that we pass on to our children, and it changes the genes that pass on to our children's children. It also changes the environments we create, like in family violence. So we create environments where our children are more likely to get exposed to this toxic thing. And 70% of Americans have experienced this in their childhood. That's an average, and that's a very conservative average. And according to WHO numbers, World Health Organization numbers, it's similar across the world. So what is this? And those of you who know, ACEs, it's adverse childhood experiences. And what does that really mean, adverse childhood experiences? It's stressful, extremely stressful experiences that children have during their childhood. That's what adversity does. It makes you stressed. And according to this study, the experiences lead to disruption in the neurodevelopment. And then all the different things happen. The social, emotional, cognitive impairments lead to adoption of very unhealthy coping behaviors like using drugs and really unhealthy ways of interacting with others to overcome some of the problems that this disruptive neurodevelopment causes, like depressive mood, like feeling angry all the time, your body bursting out of its skin, or zoning out a lot and getting very foggy all the time, or most of the time, when you really need to be paying attention. So everything over the neurodevelopment part are all about coping. And all our interventions were geared until now toward the social, emotional, and cognitive impairment and up. We really couldn't get to the neurodevelopment part of things very well. And today we have resources that really get to that neurodevelopment part. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about that. And the good thing is, this is for your representative, they're not expensive. They can be community actions about creating positive emotion, creating movement and exercise programs for the whole community. They're about eating well, and they're about helping kids develop supportive relationships with others. So these are really things that the whole community does, in a way. And I'm going to say a few things about the science of why these are as powerful as medication itself. All right, so let's go. Oh, this is another thing. According to studies, stress experienced, this is for you guys, stress experienced in childhood isn't the only problem. Stress, well, actually, stress isn't the problem. Inability to turn stress off is the problem. And if you have that problem in adulthood, if you have a beautiful childhood with no adversities at all, but then you're taking care of a child who's got a terminal illness, or you're going through something very stressful in your adulthood, your genes change, your telomeres change. And Elizabeth Blackburn got the Nobel Prize in 2009 for her research on that. So if you guys are working with traumatized people, you really need to take care of yourself and stay healthy and learn these ways to release stress on the go, all the time. So this is our first paradigm shift. Trauma is a dysregulation of the nervous system, right? And these are the studies that I'm going to be using as a jumping off ground for the things that I'm going to tell you about. So first of all, what is stress? Imagine we need stress, right? We need stress to wake up. And people who have adrenal fatigue, they don't have enough stress hormones to get up out of bed in the morning. And if you experience that, you'll know your limbs feel like rocks, and it's impossible to lift yourself off and get up. That's because your body doesn't have enough stress. So let's say you have woken up and you're getting dressed, you're building up that energy, which is really stress hormones giving you that energy. And you experience something difficult, you experience a challenge, and challenges help us grow, right? Learning is challenging and it requires stress. So you get stressed a little bit, and then your body has autonomic ways to release that stress. And your stress level falls down. And then you go ahead and do other things, and you get more stressed. You release the stress, it falls down. But then there are certain things that are extremely stressful that lift you up from normal levels all the way up to PTSD levels, and we call those traumas. And in that case, it takes a while for your body to release that stress, to calm back down. And some people are better at calming down, and we call those people resilient people. So I've always been, since I started working about trauma, I've always been curious about this thing we call resilience. What is that really? And how do we make that better, stronger, so we don't really stay up at PTSD level all the time? But then there's something else about this. It means stress accumulates. If you don't release that stress, even small amounts of stress add up, and they add up to PTSD levels of stress, right? Bullying at school adds up as a stressor to PTSD levels. Really unhealthy work environment for you, bad interactions, very unhelpful, toxic interactions with your coworkers, that adds up. And we have neuroception, where our nervous system senses the level of threat around us, and that sensation creates stress. So as we sense threat around us, even if we know in our minds we're safe, just that neuroception can add up as well. So there's a clue to something that we need to watch out for in order to protect ourselves and the children we work with. So what happens when this stress response system is activated? Well, the body can't stay at that level for long periods of time, so it tries to pull itself back down. And then this tug of war begins, as if you have this water faucet that's rusty. It's either on the on position and you have to push it really hard to get it to the off position, but then you get it all the way off. There's no in between. So you have these swings between extreme sensation of sounds, lights, they become extremely disturbing, to complete numbness where you can't even feel your body. You don't feel your heartbeat. You don't feel your fists, even if you hit it through a window. Remembering everything or not remembering anything. And this is not only physiological, it's also in terms of the things that you've learned about life and relationships and yourself. One moment you might feel extremely confident, I can, master everything, rule the world. The other moment you can feel extremely helpless, lonely, threatened, weak. One moment you can feel you can trust everybody, you have nothing to be afraid of, death doesn't scare you. The other moment you can be extremely afraid of getting sick, of dying, of losing the ones you love, people not loving you. So you're probably recognizing some of the things that I'm talking about, right? You see these in clients all the time. And we have diagnoses for these things. But maybe they're just a nervous system trying to find balance. And Stephen Porges, the creator of the polyvagal theory, says these are all about the disruption in our ability to generate adaptive responses to the environment. Our nervous system, through neuroception, is constantly assessing what's going on and trying to prepare our body to do the right thing for that moment. But when our stress response is extremely active, it stops being able to do that, and it gets stuck in that situation, and that's a problem. So we often confuse traumatic stress with depression, depressive disorders. We know that the common autonomic nervous responses to trauma, right? High levels of stress response system activation, fight, flight, freeze responses. So what happens in these fight response? The energy is allocated to the extremities, so you're ready to fight, run away. Everybody seems threatening, and you get hyper-focused. It's very difficult to control your attention. And in the freeze response, your body secretes opioids, and you get sedated, and thinking becomes very cloudy. Your activities, your body becomes very slow, heavy. You're ready to die, or you're ready to pretend you're dead. And so ADD, attention deficit disorder, is very much like freeze response. ADHD, that hyperactivity, that's wanting to move, talk all the time, is very similar to ADHD. And that sense of everybody is a threat, everyone is against me, the world is against me. It's either a win or lose situation. That's a trauma learning thing. It's part of that stress response that primes us to fight and respond to threat. And that's oppositional defiant disorder in younger children, very much like so, right? And then as the children grow up to 14 and up, we call that conduct disorder. You look at them, in a way to say, what are you doing? Why did you say that? You're curious about the child. And he or she accepts that as a threat, as a demeaning look, or you know, and that's nonverbal. You might be saying something. You might be asking the child, did you do your homework? And the child takes that as a completely different attacking statement. It's because the stress response system is active and the child is taking everything as an attack. So how do you help these kids? Do we have teachers in this room right now? Okay, so do we have one? Do we have therapists? Okay, physicians? Okay. All right, students? Okay. So I'm going to skip this video, although it's well, let's go through with it. This is a wonderful video, and it shows the stress response system go from the freeze response all the way to the relaxation state. And the host, so here you're going to see a reptile jump on the host. So if, yeah, trigger warning. If you're afraid of reptiles, snakes, there's a big snake there. Nobody gets hurt, that's a good thing. So if you're, nauseated by reptiles and whatnot, this is not the video for you. I want you to focus on the host, and if you have enough attention left, on the reaction of the other guy too. But the host will go through the freeze response to the fight-flight response, and he will relax himself. And the way he relaxes himself is a mixture of cognitive techniques as well as autonomic nervous system reflex to tend, befriend, and rest and digest. Okay, so we have a third reflex there functioning. So check that out and see if you can find it. I'm going to ask you what happened where.
Can I find this in Arlington? Oh, good grief, yes. Oh, boy. Let's see how long it is. Let's hold it out. This guy is probably close to 5 feet. Texas rat snakes are going to be one of the largest snakes that you find in the Metroplex area. Get this thing off me, man. Get this thing off me, man. God dang. What is this thing jumping at me for, man? He likes you. Yeah, I can tell, man. All right, let's try to get back under control. You didn't tell me the thing jumped. Oh, God dang. Okay, let's try to get our composure here. You're all right. Yeah. So the Texas rat snake can be up to 5 feet long, huh? That's right. Some of them can get upwards and approach 7 feet.
Okay, so what did you see? Who wants to comment? Where did he experience the freeze response? Go ahead, shout out. Yes, he fell down, right? He stopped being able to speak and even breathe, and then his muscle tone went away and he fell down. And then he immediately jumped up because it's a safe environment. He has someone who's responsible to protect him, that Ray guy, the animal trainer. So he went immediately to the protective person and he said, in the fight response, yeah, he was screaming at the guy who was supposed to protect him, right? Supposed to protect him. So there's a lot of anger there, right? Yeah. And so you saw what that looks like. He was constantly moving, that inability to stand still, right? Now our kids are stuck in these states. Can you imagine how difficult it would be if you were stuck in any one of these and trying to function? Yeah. And all throughout, he was also using relaxation techniques. Did you notice those? He was taking a deep breath, and he was using his voice. Ray, what's going on, Ray? He used one cognitive technique, and that was distraction. He tried to shift the topic back to the snakes. What a lovely topic, but that was better than being scared. And so the rest of everything he did, trying to touch Ray, get that support, laughing, and even moving around as he was doing. It was fight response as well as trying to let the body release that extra energy. So you saw everything happening in the span of 1 minute, and this is what we do every day, all the time. The only problem with our kids is they can't shift out. They can't use the relaxation techniques to shift out of those 2 responses, 3 responses. All right, so let's move on. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but the problem with cognitive responses to trauma is, and I can't really get the slideshow back up. Sorry. So let me go on and explain. The cognitive, right now we're mostly using cognitive behavioral therapies in dealing with trauma. And what are they based on? They're based on the willpower. You use your willpower to think, change your thinking, and by changing your thinking and your behaviors, you create new patterns of behavior, new lifestyles, which change the feelings. That's the way things are supposed to work. But when you talk with a survivor, they're always saying, you know, I know what I'm supposed to do. It's just very difficult to do that. And a lot of the times you might have a beautiful session with somebody and you feel that there's incredible insights that the client gained through that session. You feel, yeah. And the next session, the client comes back and they've forgotten everything. It's like you didn't talk about those things. And you're wondering, did I really take good notes? Did that really happen? It did, and it's a natural response to trauma. What happens is when our body, well, not just trauma, it's stress response activation. When the stress response is activated gradually, it turns off parts of the brain that are used to remember, think, plan, you know, make abstract connections. And the more it's activated, the more those areas are turned off. And with children, if they've grown in a constant activated state, then those areas are very, very difficult to turn back on. In fact, I do neurofeedback, and I'm going to talk about that technique in a minute. When you look at the screen, in neurofeedback, you see the different activation of the brain through the electrical charges of the neurons. And when you look in children who are neglected, you don't see any activation when they're doing tasks that require thinking or remembering. But that's not that's not the end of the story, because the brain develops in a use-dependent way. So the more you can help children use those areas will come back alive again. The brain is very plastic. So we have incredible opportunity here that we know all this. So about neurofeedback, this is a very new, well, it's not new. It was developed by NASA to help astronauts who went to space.
This is just the next generation of exercise. We've got.
And I'll let a scientist, Judd Brewer from Yale, I think, talk about it, and then go on from there.
Got the physical, exercise components down, and now it's about working out how can we actually train our minds.
Dr. Brewer is trying to understand how mindfulness can alter the functioning of the brain. He uses a cap lined with 128 electrodes.
We're going to start filling each of these 128 wells with conduction gel.
The electrodes are able to pick up signals from the posterior cingulate, part of a brain network linked to memory and emotion.
This is all just picking up electrical signal from the top of your head.
Since attending the mindfulness retreat, I'd been meditating daily and was curious to see if it had an impact on my brain.
We're going to have you start with thinking of something that was very anxiety-provoking for you.
Okay.
When I thought about something stressful, the cells in my brain's posterior cingulate immediately started firing, shown by the red lines that went off the chart on the computer screen.
Just drop into meditation.
Okay.
When I let go of those stressful thoughts and refocused on my breath, within seconds the brain cells that had been firing quieted down, shown by the blue lines on the computer.
That's really fascinating to see like that.
Dr. Brewer believes everyone can train their brains to reach that blue mindfulness zone.
Okay. So this is not new, but it's new in our implementation of it in post-traumatic stress disorder treatment. And it has some research that's accumulating now, thanks to the work of Bessel van der Kolk and other researchers around the world. It doesn't have a lot of support from the National Institute of Health yet, but hopefully at some point we're going to get that as well. So these are some studies. It reduced sleep problems in 100% of people who got it at one study, and in another study it increased the sense of serenity, clarity, memory, and attention in all the participants. And I really like this one, Yale University Child Study Center and Veterans Affairs, University College of London. You see, it's a very international consortium of researchers found that 42% of all PTSD symptoms decreased in veterans. And then another study that used people who, worked with people who have 9 different trauma types, 9 ACEs. Remember, as the number increases, the severity of your trauma increases. 48% of them who received neurofeedback were no longer diagnosable with PTSD. 48% who had 9 different traumas. I mean, that's really huge. And if you look at that drawing in the beginning, if anybody is interested in child development work and art therapy and really assessment of cognitive skills, you'll notice the change between very sharp, very basic understanding of man, woman, and family relationships to, thank you, to getting into very detailed, thinking about the relationships, thinking about the personalities, kind of understanding of those people in just 40 sessions. And with neurofeedback, you usually do 2 sessions a week. So that's 20 weeks. And then we have EMDR. I heard that you're going to hear a speaker talk specifically about EMDR in one of the sessions coming up, so I'm not going to spend too much time there too. But EMDR is also a technique that uses the body's information processing that's done during sleep. And it activates that mechanism while you're awake. So when you're sleeping and that process is going on, the rapid eye movement process, impact of really negative emotions wakes you up, and that process is cut. But when you do it awake, you can continue doing it, and then there's this motivating person in the room with you that's helping you through it. The EMDR has also been around since the beginning of TFCBT, for example, but it didn't get a lot of support because people didn't get good, consistent results from the studies. Because EMDR doesn't work on everybody. It really has negative effects on people with epileptic brains and people who have complex trauma, who usually have a lot of dissociative symptoms, multiple identities, for example. I have a lot of clients who have that sort of problem, that sort of coping response to their traumas. And what happens is one identity protects the rest of the organism against you when you're doing EMDR, so it doesn't work. So anyway, because of these reasons, this was really regarded as a woo-woo therapy. And now it's gained a lot of respect. Neurofeedback is only accepted for ADHD treatment, ADD, ADHD treatment as a primary mode of therapy. It's approved for just that purpose. EMDR was recommended as therapy for PTSD treatment in the last 5 years. I think there are some conflicts, some thoughts to remove that approval, but I don't know how that's going to work out. But the thing is, it works. If you have a person with, for example, I had a client who had one sexual assault experience. It was a severe experience where, she saw her best friend murdered, gun wound. It's harder to deal with. But with 4 sessions of EMDR, she was able to release the physiological and cognitive problems that came with that, learning problems. But of course, you always build that resilience, that ability of the person to release the stress as it comes. That's a completely different set of skills that you build, that all of us need to build. So we have now this knowledge being used to create products. On the left, you have a blood pressure reducing device that really works by teaching you how to breathe. Why does blood pressure get reduced as you learn how to breathe? Because your stress is lowered. This is something core to being human. We like to categorize trauma, PTSD, as something like a flu or some sort of an illness somebody caught. But it's part of our everyday life. It's in everything that we do. And so the solutions that we bring to the activation of the stress response really improves all parts of our lives. Now, this is another, I'm trying to convince you that some of the things that we take for granted
You're telling me Clorox
are
2 will help
actually
remove these?
as powerful as the strongest medications out there. So this is a 5-minute video, and I still have some time, so I'm going to show all of it to
Working
you.
for years because I have this condition called focal dystonia. Dystonia is a movement disorder which can affect different muscles. In my case, it all started with the neck. I remember my first real symptoms. I was interviewing this guy, we were just sitting like this. And I had to look at him towards that direction. And I just felt this enormous strength to look at the other side, and I couldn't stop it. So, and they were filming the interview, so I had to use my hand just to pretend that I was still looking at him, but with all my strength, with all my energy, I had to watch the other side. And when the interview finished, I was like, oh my God, I need to see a doctor. I was so scared. And I don't know, they've been like 10 terrible years. They've been really good doctors, who believe in what they do, in the buttocks injections, but sometimes they just don't work for you. And that's what I loved about, the Joaquin approach, because sometimes you just have to use the body as a tool to get to your brain.
When I first met him, he was considering DBS, that is a neurosurgery. He was devastated psychologically. Okay, go to this side.
I couldn't drive. I couldn't eat by myself. I couldn't drink by a glass because my head just went on moving.
Follow me. Okay, he can do this. It seems that it's simple, but this was impossible some weeks ago.
So I was just walking. I was just walking with my headphones on. So there was Vogue playing, Vogue, the hit from the 90s. And as I followed the beat, the music, I realized that my walking was better. The day after, I told Joaquin, I made this movie. I wanted to show him. So I got home, I just filmed myself dancing, and I showed it to him. And he was like, oh my God, this is your treatment. This is your treatment. I mean, you are another person while you dance. Every day has been a discovery. Every day I discovered something different. I discovered new movements. I discovered that I could be in charge of my body again. It has to be loud for me to work, okay? I've always known that dancing is good to me. But still, no doctor would tell me, Federico, just dance.
The reason why dancing works for Federico is because he loves it. So he's stimulating certain areas in the brain, and also he needs to focus and he needs to plan ahead, so this increased prefrontal activity. At the moment, I think that we are starting to understand what is going on. And we are starting to understand what works really for patients affected by dystonia. I am hoping for a huge revolution in the way that patients are treated. It's not about, just treating the symptom. It's understanding what is going on and helping them to recover control over their lives again.
What I learned with Joaquin is that you don't have to go so deep in your life. It's just your body that has unlearned things. He taught me that I can train my brain back.
Okay, so you see, the reason that dancing helps is because it trains the parts of the brain that get deactivated with stress. It reactivates those parts. And that's a huge thing, being able to reactivate the parts of the brain that get inhibited or get shut down. And it's fun, it's good for you, it's like medicine. We think of it as just letting go, letting loose, and drinking and getting drugs and then doing it for sex or finding partners, whatever, or getting attention. We have all these barriers against movement, but it's medicine. I really want you to understand how important it is for your health. You need to do it like you take your vitamins. All right, so I have another really important paradigm shift that I want to talk about, and that's the enteric brain. Now, in the nervous system pages that you have in your folders, that explains the nervous system, there are two changes that have been made, and they're very novel changes. First of all, the autonomic nervous system, according to that diagram, has the sympathetic and parasympathetic subsystems. Now it also has the enteric brain. And this part of our body, the gut, is where the gut feelings come from. It holds 5 times more neurons than the spinal cord and 99% of our genes. Now, we talk about racism and how our genes can impact the way we experience certain illnesses and our behaviors and all that stuff. What we eat impacts 99% of how we feel and how we behave. Just 1% depends on the human genes that we always talk about. 1% is about all this thing we call race. The rest, 99%, is about the gut microbiome. And that can change within days, within weeks. The scientists have turned slim, healthy, germ-free, microbe-free mouse into a diabetic and obese mouse within a week. And that's because they were transplant some of the microbes from the diabetic mouse to the germ-free mouse. And they're trying to do similar things to heal humans, but that hasn't been really helpful so far. So what I really recommend you to do is eat lots of fiber, high fiber foods, drink lots of water, eat from a wide variety of food sources, buy your food from that come from Mexico, that come from China, because of various reasons, but you want to keep a high diversity of your microbic population. Now, our body also keeps track of everything. There's this thing called homeostasis. And everything our organism does is like a harmony. When our heart starts beating fast, our stomach adjusts to that. When our stomach is sensing some sort of stress, our heart beats faster. And that goes with all of our organs. And that's done through something called homeostasis. And you have the power to tap into that. And it's called interoception. When you feel hungry, when you feel thirsty, you're actually tapping into that homeostatic process and hearing what your body is, what situation your body is in now, and what it needs to regain that homeostatic balance. When you get stressed, if you were able to feel how tense your muscles are when you're getting really tense, imagine how good that would be. You would immediately do something to release that stress. You would roll your shoulders, roll your head, take deep breaths, take a walk, but we have our interoception very limited. We need to expand that interoceptive capacity. And that's healing. That's healing for us to avoid highly emotional situations and to enhance our resilience. It's good to enhance our resilience. So, one other paradigm shift is something I was talking about the whole time, whole organism resilience. Now, these are the things that enhance the resilience of children. This is what we know, this is what we go by. Family support, and you can change this to adults as well. For example, in adults, instead of family support, you can use chosen family, right? Peer support, coworkers and friends. Competence, same. Self-efficacy, being able to make a change in the world, create change. And competence is, of course, I can do things. Self-esteem, I'm worth good things. I'm worthy, I deserve good things in life. Instead of school connectedness, you can use for adults being able to be fulfilled in your, and productive in the world, right? In terms of spiritual belief, I just like to use the terms having hope for the future and a belief in social justice. Social contract really is the thing here. When we experience trauma, one common question is, why did this bad thing happen to me? I've been good. I've been doing everything I'm supposed to do. And that's a rupture in the social contract. And having that belief in one way or another helps you be strong. And now I have a new definition of resilience, and this is my own definition, so I don't, you're free to go with me or not. But in addition to these psychological resilience factors, I believe that the stronger you have your diet, the better you take care of your metabolism, which is your energy balance, which has to do with movement and activities that you do. The better you sleep, the better you take care of your nervous system by doing neurological exercises that I have developed, in my movement system, and more supportive social and physical environments you create for yourself, the higher your resilience will be. And finally, a new commitment to human relationships. Now, this is a study that was done with veterans before and after, during and after they went to war. When you look at those faces, you can see the pain. You can feel the pain. That's a human gift you have. This gift stops us from hurting each other. And it's a huge gift. It also helps protect ourselves from dangerous people. We try to stay away from people who look like this because on a neural sense, we know that it can be contagious. We can get like that too. But now we know where those senses come from. We can better manage those sensations, to run away, to get stressed when we're around people like this. And we can also provide people in that situation something very precious, our own positive emotions, our ability to smile, and give them acceptance, love, connection that's authentically friendly. We can't lie to the nervous system. So we have to be authentic when we do these things. So that's a new new paradigm shift. We really didn't recognize, except for a few models of therapy, how important the relationship is. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.